Prince Harry had always longed for a life that felt real, away from the cameras and the palace walls. After leaving his royal duties behind, he had found a sense of peace in a quiet countryside home with his wife, Meghan, and their children. The days were simple: morning walks, tending the garden, and helping with the local community projects. For the first time in years, Harry felt like just another man enjoying the small things in life. He had grown fond of spending his afternoons reading books or listening to music by the window. The laughter of his children filled the house, and he often found himself smiling for no reason. Life was calm, and he was grateful for it. One sunny afternoon, Harry was in the middle of planting some new flowers when he received an unexpected invitation. It was a formal letter, sealed with an unfamiliar logo, a playful mask with a wide grin. He opened it curiously. The invitation read, "Dear Prince Harry, you are cordially invited to a private charity gala, hosted by Jim Carrey. This event is to support mental health awareness and aims to bring together influential voices. Your presence would be an honor." Harry felt a bit surprised. Jim Carrey, the famous comedian and actor, inviting him to a mental health gala. Harry had always respected Jim's comedic talent, but they had never met before. Still, mental health was a cause close to Harry's heart, so he thought attending might help spread a positive message. Later that evening, Harry discussed it with Meghan. She was supportive, telling him that his presence would bring more attention to the cause. "Just be careful," she said gently. "I've heard Jim Carrey can be a little unpredictable." Harry laughed, brushing off the warning. "What's the worst that could happen? It's just a charity event." Little did he know that Jim Carrey had been planning something far more elaborate than a simple evening of speeches and donations. Jim Carrey had always been a fan of the strange and unexpected. Behind his smile and comedic acts was a mind that loved puzzles and challenges. He had grown tired of the typical Hollywood parties and yearned for something that would bring back the thrill, the excitement of a game that no one else could match. When he learned that Prince Harry was now living a quieter life, Jim's imagination sparked. He decided to create a game that would challenge Harry's patience, test his intelligence, and possibly even push him to his limits. To the world, it would look like a regular charity gala. But in Jim's mind, it was the opening move in a grand psychological game that he intended to play with Prince Harry. He wanted to see if the royal prince could handle his unpredictable wit and cunning mind. Harry had no idea what was in store. He accepted the invitation with a kind heart, thinking he was simply helping to support an important cause. He even prepared a short speech about his experiences with mental health and how important it was to keep the conversation alive. The day of the gala was just around the corner. Harry had chosen a simple yet elegant suit, and Meghan reminded him to stay calm and be himself. He kissed his children goodnight and headed out, unaware that the calm life he had built was about to be shaken by a storm he never expected. This was just the beginning of Jim Carrey's elaborate game, a game that Harry would soon have to play, whether he liked it or not. Prince Harry arrived at the grand venue that evening, a beautifully restored old theater in the heart of London. Its historic architecture gave the place an air of charm and mystery. Harry felt a mix of excitement and curiosity as he stepped inside. He had expected a small, intimate gathering, but instead, the event was bustling with journalists, celebrities, and a handful of people he recognized from past royal functions. The decorations were elegant, but had an unusual twist. Oversized masks hanging from the ceiling, and a few strange, abstract sculptures that seemed to grin at the guests. A violinist played a haunting melody in the background, setting a tone that was both inviting and slightly eerie. Harry found himself scanning the crowd for Jim Carrey. He had prepared a short speech about his work with mental health and was eager to contribute. A friendly staff member guided him to a reserved seat near the front. He couldn't help but notice that the event had a theatrical feel. almost like a stage set for a play rather than a standard charity gala. As Harry settled in, the lights dimmed and a spotlight focused on the stage. The host, a young woman with bright red hair, introduced the evening and spoke warmly about the importance of supporting mental health. Her words were sincere, and Harry felt reassured. Then, with a flourish of music, Jim Carrey appeared. Dressed in a sleek black suit and wearing a dramatic mask that covered half his face, Jim's entrance was nothing short of theatrical. The crowd erupted in applause, and cameras flashed from every angle. Harry clapped politely, although something in Jim's posture felt off. A little too grand, a little too forced. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jim began, his voice smooth, yet carrying a playful edge. "Tonight is not just a night of giving, but also a night of challenging ourselves. I believe that to truly support mental health, we must step outside our comfort zones and face the games life throws at us." Harry raised an eyebrow. Games? He thought this was a gala. Jim continued. "To make this evening truly unforgettable, I've prepared a series of lighthearted challenges. Think of it as a way to remind us that, even in the darkest times, laughter can be a powerful medicine." The audience chuckled and applauded. Harry tried to smile, but his mind was already on alert. Something about Jim's tone suggested there was more to this than just fun. Then Jim turned towards Harry. "And what better way to start this evening than with our special guest, Prince Harry himself?" Jim's grin widened. "Prince Harry, would you do us the honor of joining me on stage for our first challenge?" Harry hesitated, but the crowd was already clapping and cheering his name. Meghan's gentle warning echoed in his mind. "Just be careful." He took a deep breath and stood up, his smile calm yet cautious. Jim guided him to the center of the stage, where a small table with a strange puzzle box awaited. Jim leaned closer and whispered, "Let's see if the prince can handle a little game." Harry forced a polite laugh, but inside he felt a sense of unease. He wasn't sure what Jim had in mind, but he knew one thing. This was no ordinary charity gala. Jim addressed the audience with a dramatic flourish. "Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, let's play." The lights brightened, the music rose, and Harry realized that he was now part of Jim Carrey's game. A game he had no choice but to play. He glanced at the puzzle box, the mask, and the crowd. One thing was clear, the real challenge had just begun. Prince Harry stood on stage, his eyes fixed on the puzzle box Jim Carrey had placed in front of him. It was a small wooden box, intricately carved with strange symbols and a single lock in the center. The lock looked ordinary, but Harry sensed that this was no ordinary game. Jim Carrey grinned at him, the half-mask still on his face, giving him an unsettling look. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced dramatically, "this puzzle represents the first step in our journey tonight. Inside this box is a secret, a key to understanding the importance of mental resilience." The crowd cheered, though some people looked as confused as Harry felt. He glanced around and saw journalists with their cameras ready, capturing every moment. The bright stage lights made it hard to see the faces clearly, but he could feel the tension in the air. Harry bent down and examined the box. He noticed that the lock had tiny etchings around it, symbols that looked like they came from different cultures, maybe even different languages. It was as if Jim had designed it to be as complicated as possible. Jim leaned in, his voice dropping to a low whisper that only Harry could hear. "This isn't just about unlocking the box, Harry. It's about unlocking yourself. Let's see what you're really made of." Harry's jaw tightened. He had come here to support mental health, not to be part of some twisted challenge. But the eyes of the crowd were on him, and backing out now would make him look weak, something Jim Carrey clearly wanted. Taking a deep breath, Harry examined the puzzle more closely. He ran his fingers over the carvings, trying to find a pattern or a clue. He thought about all the training he had received as a royal: discipline, focus, and patience. Maybe that would help him now. As he worked, Jim circled him like a predator. "Take your time, Prince," he teased, his voice amplified by the microphone. "No pressure, but remember, the world is watching." Harry ignored the jabs and kept his attention on the box. He noticed that one of the symbols looked familiar: a Celtic knot, something he'd seen on his mother's old jewelry. He pressed it gently, and to his surprise, it clicked. A small compartment popped open, revealing a second lock, even smaller and more complicated. Harry could hear the audience's murmurs of anticipation. Jim clapped his hands together dramatically. "Look at that! The prince is smarter than he looks." Harry clenched his teeth, determined not to let Jim's games get under his skin. He worked on the second lock, using his instincts and patience. Every move felt like a test, not just of his intelligence, but of his character. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the second lock gave way, and the box sprang open. Inside was a small card with the words, "Congratulations, Prince Harry. The game has just begun." Harry felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He looked up at Jim, who was smiling wickedly. "Well done," Jim said, his voice dripping with false praise. "You've passed the first challenge, but can you handle the next one?" Harry realized this wasn't about supporting mental health at all. It was about Jim Carrey's ego, his need to prove he could outwit a royal. But Harry wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. He stood tall, his eyes steady. "Bring it on," he said firmly. Jim's smile widened. "Oh, I will," he replied. The crowd erupted in applause, but Harry knew this was no game anymore. Jim Carrey was testing him, and he had no intention of losing. Prince Harry stood tall on the stage, the small puzzle box now opened and empty in his hands. The card inside had read, "The game has just begun," and the words felt more like a threat than a playful message. Jim Carrey was smiling that half-masked grin, and his eyes sparkled with the kind of mischief that made Harry's gut twist. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jim's voice boomed through the microphone, "Prince Harry has proven himself worthy of the next challenge, but this time it's not a puzzle box, it's something bigger." The crowd cheered, eager for the next act. Harry felt a surge of frustration. This wasn't supposed to be about humiliating him in front of an audience. He had come to help with mental health awareness, to share his own journey, not to be a pawn in Jim Carrey's twisted game. Jim gestured dramatically, and stagehands rolled out a large screen behind them. On it flashed the words. Harry frowned. Jim stepped forward, his mask catching the stage lights. "This, my dear prince, is the mirror of truth. It's a game I designed especially for you. You'll see images, some real, some not, and you'll have to choose which ones reflect your truth and which are lies." The crowd murmured with excitement. Some people clapped. Harry's heart pounded. This was more than a test of intelligence. It was a test of his very identity. Jim continued. "You'll have 30 seconds for each image. Get it right, and you move forward. Get it wrong, and, well, let's just say the game gets a little harder." Harry took a deep breath. "Fine," he said, his voice steady. "Let's do this." Jim smirked. "That's the spirit." The screen flickered to life, and the first image appeared. A photograph of Harry in his military uniform, standing with his squad mates. Harry felt a pang of pride and sadness at the same time. He'd spent years building bonds with his fellow soldiers, and those memories were real. "Truth," he said firmly. Jim clapped sarcastically. "Correct," he drawled. The screen flashed again, showing a tabloid headline with Harry looking angry, accusing Meghan of betrayal. Harry felt anger rise. That had been a lie, twisted by the media to sell papers. "Lie," he said coldly. Jim laughed. "Very good, Your Highness." The game continued. Harry faced a series of images and headlines, each one dredging up old wounds, photos of his mother's funeral, cruel headlines about his mental health, fake rumors about family rifts. Each choice felt like a punch to the gut, but Harry stayed focused. Jim tried to rattle him with sly comments and exaggerated praise, but Harry blocked it out. He knew who he was and what he stood for. With every answer, he felt stronger, more determined not to let Jim's games define him. Then came the final image, a photo of Harry and Meghan smiling together with their children. It was peaceful, pure, and real. "Truth," Harry said softly, but with a firmness that couldn't be shaken. Jim paused, the smile on his face faltering for a moment. "Indeed," he said, his voice low. "The prince knows his truth." The crowd applauded. Harry stood tall, breathing deeply, feeling a sense of victory. But he knew Jim wasn't done yet. Jim leaned close and whispered, "You're tougher than I thought, Harry." But the final game, that's where the real challenge begins. Harry met his gaze evenly. "I'm ready." Jim's smile returned, sharp and dangerous. "We'll see." And with that, the lights dimmed, signaling that the night and Jim's game was far from over. The lights came back up on the stage, revealing Jim Carrey standing alone, his half mask now replaced with a full mask that covered his entire face. The grin on it was exaggerated and almost menacing, a perfect reflection of the mind games he'd been playing with Harry all night. Prince Harry watched cautiously from his place on stage, his heart pounding but his mind focused. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to let Jim rattle him now. Jim spread his arms wide, the dramatic performer in him fully alive. "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the final round of tonight's special game. This one," he paused, turning slowly to face Harry, "isn't about puzzles or images. It's about trust and betrayal." A hush fell over the audience. Harry's chest tightened. Trust and betrayal? He wondered what kind of trick Jim had planned this time. Jim snapped his fingers, and two stagehands rolled out a small table with two boxes on it. One was gold, and the other silver. Jim stepped behind the table, his voice smooth as he explained, "Harry, in one of these boxes is a key to ending this game, your victory. In the other, a trap that could cost you everything. You can open only one. Choose wisely." Harry felt a rush of frustration. He was tired of being Jim's pawn, forced to play by his twisted rules. But he reminded himself that winning this game wasn't just about besting Jim. It was about proving to himself that he could handle anything life threw at him. Jim leaned forward, eyes glittering behind the mask. "Before you choose, Harry, let's make this more interesting. I'll give you a chance to ask me one question. I promise I'll answer honestly." Harry studied Jim's face, searching for any sign of weakness. He thought carefully before asking, "Why are you doing this? Why me?" Jim paused, his smile dropping for the first time. He sighed, his voice suddenly quieter. "Because, Prince, I wanted to see if the golden boy of the monarchy could handle being treated like the rest of us. I wanted to see if you're as strong as the media says you are." Harry's jaw tightened, anger and pity mixing in his chest. "So this is about proving something to yourself," he said, his voice steady. Jim shrugged. Maybe I'm just tired of playing the fool in everyone's eyes." Harry nodded slowly. "Then let's end this." He turned to the table, eyes on the boxes. Gold or silver? It could be either. He took a breath and closed his eyes, thinking about everything he had faced tonight. The puzzle box, the mirror of truth, Jim's manipulations. His gut told him that Jim would expect him to pick the gold box. Royalty, after all, is always drawn to gold. But Harry knew that Jim was clever, always twisting expectations. With a deep breath, he reached for the silver box, his hand steady. Jim's mask twitched, just a small flicker of surprise. Harry opened the box and found a small, intricately carved key resting inside. Relief and triumph flooded through him. He held it up to the audience, who erupted into cheers. Jim clapped slowly, his mask hiding his expression. "Impressive," he said, his voice low. "You made the right choice." Harry felt a sense of pride, but also a deep exhaustion. He had proven himself, not just to Jim, but to himself. Jim stepped forward and, with a slow motion, removed his mask. His face was tired, older than Harry remembered from the movies. "Congratulations, Harry," he said, his tone sincere for the first time. "You've won." Harry nodded, knowing that the victory meant more than just beating Jim's games. It meant that he had faced his fears and come out stronger on the other side. Prince Harry held the small key in his hand, the weight of it heavier than it appeared. The cheers from the crowd still echoed around him, but he barely heard them. His heart was pounding, and his mind was racing with everything that had just happened. Jim Carrey, standing across from him, seemed different now, less of the showman and more of the man beneath the mask. Jim's eyes, tired and distant, met Harry's with a hint of respect. "Well done, Harry," he said, his voice softer. "You've shown strength, patience, and resilience, all things I never gave you enough credit for." Harry's expression remained calm but firm. "Why did it have to be like this, Jim? All these games, all this pressure, what were you really trying to prove?" Jim let out a long sigh and shrugged. "Maybe I wanted to show you, and everyone else, that even the Golden Prince can be tested, that you're human, just like the rest of us." Harry thought about that for a moment. He had spent his entire life under scrutiny, every move analyzed and criticized. Maybe Jim's twisted challenges had forced him to confront parts of himself he had tried to ignore. "Jim," Harry said slowly, "I get that life can feel like a game sometimes, but there's a difference between testing someone's strength and humiliating them." Jim looked down, his shoulders sagging. "Yeah," he muttered, "maybe I crossed the line. Maybe I just got tired of being the one who always had to make people laugh." Harry felt a flicker of empathy. He knew how exhausting it could be to always wear a public face. He had done it for years, but that didn't excuse what Jim had put him through tonight. Taking a deep breath, Harry held up the key. "What does this open?" he asked, determined to finish the challenge once and for all. Jim pointed to a small door at the back of the stage. "That," he said, "opens the final room, the one where the real truth lies." Harry didn't hesitate. He walked to the door, inserted the key, and turned it. The lock clicked and the door swung open. Inside, the room was dimly lit. At the center stood a large mirror, tall and imposing. Words were etched along its frame. "The final reflection." Jim followed Harry in, his steps slow and deliberate. "This is the last part of the game," he said quietly. "This mirror doesn't lie. It shows you exactly who you are. No masks, no games." Harry stepped closer, feeling a mix of curiosity and dread. He had faced public scrutiny his whole life, but this was different. This was a chance to see himself without the layers of expectation and duty. As he looked into the mirror, his reflection stared back at him. At first, he saw the prince everyone knew, the uniform, the smile, the carefully managed persona. But as he kept looking, the image shifted. He saw the young man who had grieved for his mother, the soldier who had fought for his country, the husband and father who just wanted a peaceful life. He saw his fears, his doubts, and his strength. Tears pricked his eyes as he realized something. He was stronger than he'd ever given himself credit for. He had faced loss, criticism, and betrayal, but he had always kept going. Jim stood beside him, silent. For the first time that night, he looked vulnerable, like a man who had run out of games to play. Harry turned to him, his voice steady. "Jim, thank you for showing me that. But next time, let's just talk. No games, no masks." Jim nodded slowly. "Yeah," he whispered, his voice heavy. "No more games." Harry knew the night's challenges had changed him, and maybe Jim too. As he left the room, he felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted from his shoulders. He had faced Jim's games, and he had won. Prince Harry walked out of the mirror room, feeling as though he had just completed a marathon. His head was spinning, but his heart felt strangely lighter. The final reflection had shown him not just his strength, but also his weaknesses and humanity. As he stepped back onto the stage, the crowd had quieted. Some people were whispering among themselves, their eyes filled with curiosity and awe. Jim Carrey followed Harry, his mask now completely removed, revealing a face that looked older and more tired than the one Harry had seen in the movies. Jim took a deep breath, and for the first time that night, he looked at Harry, not as an opponent, but as a fellow human being. "You did it," Jim said softly, his voice free of sarcasm or games. "You faced every challenge I threw at you, and you won." Harry nodded, his expression calm but resolute. "I didn't come here to play games, Jim. I came to help people, to talk about mental health, to remind everyone that no one should have to face their struggles alone." Jim's eyes flickered with guilt. "I know," he admitted, "and I turned it into a circus. I guess I just wanted, I don't know, to see if you were really as strong as they say." Harry paused, studying Jim's tired face. He realized that behind all the theatrics and mind games, Jim was fighting his own battles too. "We all wear masks sometimes," Harry said gently, "but we also have to learn when to take them off." Jim looked down at the floor, his voice almost a whisper. "Yeah," he sighed. "I guess tonight was my way of hiding behind the mask one more time." Harry placed a hand on Jim's shoulder. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said, his voice calm and kind. "Let's finish this together." The two men turned to face the audience. Harry stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight wasn't just about games and puzzles. It was about breaking through the barriers we put up, the ones that stop us from asking for help, from admitting we're struggling. Mental health is a challenge that we all face in different ways, and tonight I faced mine." The audience listened, silent and respectful. Harry could see some people nodding, a few wiping tears from their eyes. He continued, "Jim's challenges weren't easy. They forced me to look at myself in ways I hadn't before, and maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Sometimes, the biggest challenges are the ones that make us see who we really are." Jim stepped forward, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Prince Harry, I owe you an apology. I let my own pain turn into a game that could have hurt you. I'm sorry for that." Harry nodded. "Apology accepted," he said simply. "But remember, Jim, you're not alone either." The audience erupted in applause, genuine, heartfelt applause. It wasn't just for Harry, it was for both of them, for the honesty, the vulnerability, and the courage it took to stand on that stage and admit their struggles. Jim smiled, a real, unmasked smile. "Thank you," he whispered. Harry felt a sense of relief wash over him. The games were over, and what remained was the simple truth. They were both human, both fighting battles that no one else could see. As the lights dimmed, Harry knew this experience would stay with him forever. He had faced Jim Carrey's challenges, but more importantly, he had faced himself, and he had come out stronger on the other side. After the applause subsided, the lights in the theater slowly brightened. Prince Harry stood at the edge of the stage, a sense of accomplishment mixed with exhaustion washing over him. The crowd's cheers had been a balm to the wounds left by Jim's games. But now that the adrenaline had faded, Harry felt the weight of everything he had faced tonight. Jim Carrey stood beside him, no longer wearing his mask, looking like a man stripped of all his defenses. His eyes were red, and the playful grin that usually defined him was gone. Instead, there was a look of acceptance, maybe even a touch of regret. Harry turned to him. "Jim," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's time to end this night properly, not with games or challenges, but with honesty." Jim's eyes met Harry's, and he nodded slowly. "You're right, Harry. I've spent so long hiding behind jokes and masks that I forgot what honesty feels like." He paused, looking out at the audience, then back at Harry. "I'm sorry for making tonight about me instead of the cause we both care about." Harry placed a reassuring hand on Jim's shoulder. "We all get lost sometimes, Jim, but what matters is finding our way back." He turned to the crowd, his voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight was supposed to be about mental health awareness, about showing that no one should have to face their battles alone. Jim and I both forgot that for a moment, but now I want to bring it back to that." The crowd listened intently, the atmosphere shifting from entertainment to reflection. Harry continued, "I've faced my own mental health struggles, just like many of you have, and I know how hard it can be to talk about it, to ask for help. But I've learned that sharing our struggles is a sign of strength, not weakness. And tonight, I think Jim showed that too." Jim's eyes glistened as he nodded. "Yeah," he whispered into his microphone, his voice thick. "It's time I stopped hiding behind the jokes. I've battled my own demons, anxiety, depression, the pressure to always be funny. I let that darkness turn into games tonight, and I hurt someone I respect in the process. I'm sorry, Harry." Harry reached out and shook Jim's hand firmly. "Apology accepted," he said simply. The audience erupted in applause, not just for the handshake but for the moment of vulnerability shared between the two men. Jim took a deep breath, composing himself. "Prince Harry, you've shown me something tonight, something I think we can all learn from. You've shown me that strength isn't just about winning. It's about being open and honest, even when it's hard." Harry smiled, the tension in his shoulders finally releasing. "Thank you, Jim, and thank you all for being here tonight. Let's remember that mental health is a journey we take together, not alone." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. The applause felt different this time, no longer a response to a game or a challenge, but a genuine appreciation for the humanity on display. Jim gave a small bow, tears finally streaming down his face. "I think I'm ready to take the mask off for good," he whispered. Harry nodded. "One step at a time," he said kindly. Together they left the stage, the weight of the night's events behind them. As they walked off, Harry felt lighter than he had in months. The games were over, and the real work, the healing, could finally begin. Backstage, the atmosphere was calm, yet charged with a sense of relief. Prince Harry and Jim Carrey had walked off stage to find a small group of event organizers waiting. Some wore relieved smiles, while others looked a little uneasy, unsure of how to approach the pair after the night's dramatic turn of events. One of the organizers, a young woman with a clipboard, approached Harry. "Prince Harry," she began cautiously, "we can't thank you enough for what you've done tonight. You handled everything with grace. It was powerful." Harry smiled gently. "Thank you," he said. "I just wanted to remind everyone that mental health isn't a game. It's real, and it matters." Jim stood a few feet away, his head bowed. His face was pale, and he looked exhausted. Harry walked over to him, offering a steady hand. "Jim," he said, "we may have started this night as rivals, but I think we've both learned a lot about ourselves." Jim looked up, his eyes watery. "Yeah," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I've spent so much of my life being the funny guy that I forgot how to be real. Tonight, I wanted to challenge you, but in the end, I think I challenged myself more than anything." Harry nodded, understanding. "It takes courage to admit that," he said. "And that's what people need to see. Not just a prince or a comedian, but two people being real about what they've faced." A producer approached them both. "Gentlemen," she said, "the press is waiting outside. They're eager to hear from you, but we can arrange for you to speak privately first, if you'd prefer." Harry glanced at Jim, then back at the producer. "No," he said firmly. "We'll talk to them together. We both have something to say." Jim gave a small smile. "Thanks, Harry. Let's do this right." They stepped outside into a sea of cameras and microphones. Flashbulbs popped and reporters shouted questions. Harry held up a hand, signaling for calm. "Tonight was supposed to be about supporting mental health," he began, his voice strong. "Jim and I had a complicated evening, but I think it showed that no matter who you are, a prince or a comedian, mental health affects us all. We both faced our own challenges tonight, and I think we both learned a lot." Jim stepped forward, his voice unsteady but honest. "I owe Prince Harry an apology for turning this into something it wasn't supposed to be. I let my own issues get in the way of what really mattered, helping people." A hush fell over the reporters, many of them visibly moved. Harry continued, "The important thing is that we've both learned that strength comes from vulnerability, from asking for help, from being honest about our struggles. And that's the message we want to share with everyone tonight." A reporter called out, "Prince Harry, do you forgive Jim Carrey?" Harry smiled. "Yes," he said simply, "because forgiveness is part of healing, and I think we both needed that tonight." Jim's eyes welled up as he turned to Harry. "Thank you," he whispered. Harry placed a hand on Jim's shoulder. "We're in this together now," he said. The press conference ended with a sense of unity and understanding. Harry felt a burden lift off his shoulders. The games were finally over, and in their place was a real, honest conversation, one that would inspire others to open up about their own mental health struggles. Together, Harry and Jim walked back inside, ready to face the world, not as opponents, but as allies in a cause that mattered more than any game. The night air outside the venue felt crisp and refreshing. Prince Harry and Jim Carrey stepped away from the press conference, their heads held high. The bright lights of the cameras were behind them now, but the lessons of the evening still lingered in their hearts. Harry felt a strange mix of relief and hope. He had come expecting a simple charity event, and instead faced a gauntlet of challenges that tested his patience, his integrity, and his strength. Yet in the end, he had found something even more valuable, a deeper understanding of himself and a bridge to someone he never expected to connect with. Jim walked beside him, his shoulders relaxed, a new humility in his step. For the first time in a long time, he felt free from the mask he had worn for so many years. "You know, Harry," he said softly, "I've spent so much of my life trying to make people laugh that I forgot what it meant to be real. Tonight you reminded me." Harry smiled. "We all have our ways of coping, Jim. Humor, duty, even games. But eventually, we all need to face the truth about ourselves." Jim nodded, his eyes serious. "Yeah, and you taught me that sometimes the strongest people are the ones who admit they're vulnerable. I've been hiding behind jokes and stunts for too long." Harry reached out and shook Jim's hand. "I'm glad we faced this together. I think we both grew from it." They walked a few steps in silence, letting the moment settle. The cool night air felt like a clean start. A staff member approached them, holding a clipboard and looking slightly nervous. "Prince Harry, Mr. Carrey," she said, "the event organizers would like to know if you'd both be willing to sign a statement together, something that highlights what you've both learned tonight and how it connects to mental health awareness. It would mean a lot to the campaign." Harry glanced at Jim, who gave a small smile. I think that's the least we can do, Jim said. Together they signed the statement, a simple, powerful message about unity, vulnerability, and the importance of talking about mental health. The staff member's eyes lit up with gratitude as she took the signed paper. "Thank you both," she said, her voice trembling. "This will make a real difference." As they left the building, Harry turned to Jim one last time. "So, no more games?" Jim chuckled, a lightness in his tone. "No more games, Harry. Just the real work now. Being honest, helping people, and maybe, just maybe, learning to laugh without the mask." Harry grinned. "That's a game I think we can both win." They shook hands one last time before parting ways. Harry felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The night's challenges had forced him to look inside himself in ways he never had before. And in facing those challenges, he had grown stronger, not just as a prince, but as a person. As he walked to his car, Harry glanced back at the building where it had all happened. The bright lights had faded, leaving only the quiet glow of street lamps. The night felt calm now, the storm of Jim's games finally over. He knew he'd carry the lessons of this night with him always. That strength wasn't about winning every challenge, but about facing them with honesty and courage. And sometimes, even a game could reveal the deepest truths. With a deep breath and a grateful heart, Prince Harry drove away, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. This time with no games, only real life and the strength to face it.